Hello, everyone. Welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, the Executive Director of Allens Lane Art Center. Today, I have with me Greg Brellochs. It's going to be a fun conversation. But before we begin, I want to thank everybody who not only logged in today, but for those people who have made donations to Allens Lane Art Center. We really appreciate your support, especially in this tough time. Thank you very much. So, Greg, thanks very much for agreeing to appear today. Welcome. So I'd like to start where I normally start with artists, which is, could you tell me a little bit about how did your life in the arts begin?
No, it's always a tough question to say, how far back do you want to go? I kind of think that one of the most pivotal things for me in this evolution was when I decided to go to art school, because it wasn't kind of a thing that I had set my sights on early on in my childhood, like some people do. I had actually, out of high school, started studying health science at Springfield College in Western Massachusetts. And I was actually about a year and a half into the program with the idea of eventually becoming maybe a physical therapist or athletic trainer, when I was really unhappy with the program and kind of in the dumps generally, kind of a rough spot in life. And I was wondering, what is it that I want to do for my career, for the future? And the whole time I'm sitting there kind of in this depressive phase, I was sketching and I was drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate to have supportive parents, and the words of my mother were in my ear saying, you can do anything that you set your heart to. Just, do something that you love.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, here's this thing that I've been doing my whole life for fun. Why not try to make it a career?
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that I really made this whole life and lifestyle decision to embrace art and to follow that path and that muse to see where it would lead.
Did you switch over in classes, or?
I ended up transferring.
Oh.
I left Springfield College and transferred to the Massachusetts College of Art out in Boston, and then did my undergrad studies there.
What was the degree in, for just fine arts, or is it?
It was a B.F.A in sculpture. So my undergrad is in sculpture, and actually I did sculpture all the way throughout my graduate studies as well. I still from time to time do sculpture, even though maybe if anyone knows my work, they're probably much more familiar with things like what's behind me, graphite drawings. I have a background in sculpture, actually.
Yeah, I was surprised. So I obviously did a little research, and I saw on your Instagram feed you had some sculptures, sort of towards the bottom of the thing, and they were great. I was thrilled to see them, and it really sort of expanded your oeuvre, I would say, because I primarily know you as a draftsman, as a drawer. So when was the last time you dipped your toe into sculpture?
Probably with those images that are on Instagram. Maybe 3 years ago, so I still teach sculpture. I'm a professor at Camden County College in Blackwood, New Jersey. And I teach all sorts of foundation classes like 2D design, drawing one, and sculpture and 3D design. And in the studio, we had some blocks of marble laying around and some limestone. As an undergrad, I actually did quite a bit of wood carving. It was one of my favorite mediums. And so I decided to pick up the chisels and try a block of stone. And once you get into a medium and you kind of get a taste for it, one thing leads to another. Next thing you know, you've got a mini series going. So I did a handful of stone carvings, and I've done some plaster casting here and there. So just every now and then, when the mood strikes, maybe I get a little bit tired of the graphite drawings, or I hit a block there, switch it up and do something else. I've lots of ideas for sculpture, but it's always a matter of time, logistics, money, all of those other factors that come into what you end up making. And the drawing does most of what I want it to do for me. It's the most fulfilling. But sculpture ideas are always percolating.
Well, the drawings can really compact sculpture. You need a lot of room for all that kind of stuff too.
There were a lot of those kind of very pragmatic considerations that I made at the end of my graduate studies. I'd gotten into a place where I was my thesis exhibition was a 9-foot wide by 18-foot long room that I built within a larger gallery space at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And I created a complete black box, black rug, black walls, light kill entrance, 2 4-foot diameter hemispheres created out of wax and resin.
Wow.
So you basically entered into this chapel.
Yeah.
And this deep space abyss with these levitating objects. I loved it. It was great. But of course, after the show, all the the wall material and everything went in the dumpster.
Yeah.
Sculptures went in the basement, and it's really a place where I got to in my sculpture that was just so expensive and logistically so challenging that I found a better way, an easier way, if you will, to really kind of delve into the ideas that I was exploring, but with a new medium.
Yeah, for sculpture, you really kind of need like a patron who's going to just purchase it on the spot and take it with them. Otherwise, what do you do with it all? Yeah, I hear that all the time. So you went to grad school at B.F.A, right? Yeah. And then you decided to stay in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could have moved out like a lot of people do, but you decided to stay. So tell me about afterwards, did you get a studio right away?
Actually, my studio, and we are in my studio currently, which is in my house.
Oh, okay.
I've always had my studio in my house.
Oh.
Part of that has to do with the fact that when I moved to Philadelphia, I was actually coming from Munich, Germany. I was living over there for 5 years prior to that. I had married a German woman. My daughter was born in Munich. And when we moved to Philadelphia so that I could go to grad school, I had a 1-year-old in tow. And that meant that, I'd go to school, I'd attend classes, I'd do some work during the day, but I'd always be home in time to cook dinner and to be with my daughter and read bedtime stories and the like. And the time that I really had to do my work was at night. And leaving the house, going to a studio was a lot more difficult than just having the studio right there. I love that, and to this day, my routine is kids go to bed, I come up to the 3rd floor into the studio and do my work until I'm too exhausted.
Well, I totally agree. As an artist who also has his studio in his house, there's no way I could give it up now. So I'm just so used to it.
Yeah, some people benefit by getting out of the house. It's like going to work. They get into the right mindset, and that's the best scenario for them. For me, it's having the creature comforts of the coffee maker down in the kitchen, all of that.
You got your art coffee, and then you got, everything flows. So in better times, before the pandemic, would you ever have people come and visit your studio?
Oh, sure.
So you were open to that?
Yeah. So I live currently in Mount Airy. I moved here in about 2008. Prior to that, I was renting an apartment on Corinthian Avenue right next to the Eastern State Penitentiary. I participated in the Philadelphia Open Studio Tours back then. Was glad to have the public come in.
Right.
Not quite as accessible where I am now. And so what I've done in years past has been to work together with my partner, Jenna Hannum, who is a local artist, and she has a studio at the Stenton Guild over in town. And so we've kind of gotten into this routine where we'll alternate years that we participate in post and kind of take over her studio for the weekend, because again, it's a more accessible space to the public.
Oh yeah.
I'm always glad to host an interested gallery curator, whomever who wants to do a studio visit, and I don't think the public is going to show up in droves. So
just you, but after this video, they might. So you never know.
Like most artists, of course, I love people coming to check out.
Well, how do people get in touch with you? Because that's one of the things I'd love to promote is you're on social media, right?
Yep.
So it's your Instagram.
Instagram is kind of my primary mode of getting my work out there. As soon as I finish a piece, I take a snapshot, I upload it. It's a great forum to kind of have a running dialogue with people who are interested in the work, leaving comments, direct messaging, stuff like that. And if anyone's interested, it's just simply my name, G, for Greg, and then Brellochs, Brellochs. I also have a website, which is gregorybrellochs.com.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, there's always good old Gmail. So brellochs@gmail.com.
Well, now in days of the pandemic, I'm always encouraging people to, reach out to artists and ask them questions and get them to do, photographs of their newest work. And artists love to talk about their work, and they're just dying for a reason for somebody to ask them a question. So make sure to do that. So one of the things you had mentioned was your studio's in your house, and you have your art coffee in a special mug, I assume. When you go into your studio, one of the things I'm always fascinated by is, do you have any specific studio rituals that you need to do in order to get ready to work? I'd love to hear that.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I have to do them, but there are definitely things that I kind of, do over and over again. So one of the things that has always accompanied me is music.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those, at this point in time, old-fashioned guys who has a CD player and a stack of CDs.
It's not a phonograph?
Not quite. But I love to listen to music, and I will get into this kind of cycle of listening to an album or a band in depth for,
Mm-hmm.
it could go on for a month.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I find that helps create is the same general frame of mind and emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you work on something, some of my work extends over weeks, if not months, depending on the scale and the scope of it.
Mm-hmm.
And life is always evolving and changing. Things are happening in the outside world all the time, but you're trying to come back to this frame of mind and mental state that, is going to give birth to this kind of unified work of art.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this challenge of getting back into that frame of mind again and again and again. And I find the music kind of helps.
Yeah, when you dip into your creativity, do you find that you're the kind of artist that, I find there's usually two camps, the kind that maybe have an initial idea and then grow it over time, but then there's those other artists that it hits them like a thunderclap, like, oh, this is it, and then they sort of make what their vision is. How are you one or the other, maybe a little bit of both, or?
I don't know if I have a short, concise answer to that. I have an inkling of how I could get to it. So after graduate school, I finished at B.F.A in 2004, and that's when I embarked on these large scale graphite drawings for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And between 2005 and 2009, 2010, it was this really, really fertile time for me where I was coming up with new series, new form languages, one after the other after the other. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I think it was some of the strongest work I've ever done. Mm-hmm. But then after doing that, at a very high rate and high level for about 5-6 years, I hit this point of what am I going to do next? How am I going to continue to grow, continue to evolve, mm-hmm. come up with new things that are as good or hopefully better than what I've done before? And that's where I started to go back and cycle through some of the series that I had done earlier and kind of flesh them out, grow them further, and see mm-hmm. how they evolved. And in a certain way, I'm still in that kind of process. So if you imagine it, it's like a river mm-hmm. that branches into these little side, rivulets or eddies, and mm-hmm. then it keeps on swirling and eddying out from there. Mm-hmm. I'm exploring where those eddies go. So there's a continuity with previous work for sure, mm-hmm. But I'm always looking for new ways to evolve it. The individual work, so take any one of the ones behind me, there's usually a general kind of form language that's derived from nature, that's inspired by nature, that serves as the impetus for the work. And I have almost like a little flash vision of what that could be. Mm-hmm. And then I dive into it and it kind of, evolves in a more kind of organic and improvisational fashion.
Well, you actually
flash.
you touched on something that was actually my next question. I'm curious. So I know you from these sort of biomorphic forms that are behind you, and I've seen a lot of those pieces, and I'm curious if you could tell us what started you on this path using nature as inspiration. And I'm curious, was it like someone or somebody else's work or something somebody said to you, or was it just the fact that you were studying nature?
Oh
How did
gosh.
this come about?
Well, now I feel like I have to go all the way back to my early childhood years.
Did you have like a rattle that was like a head of cabbage or something?
I do that a little bit. So I grew up in Ithaca, New York, and my father was an architect. He had a local firm there in Ithaca, and he designed our house that I grew up in, and it's literally in the woods, surrounded by, at this point, 50-foot tall pine trees and the like. And I spent, this was, 70s, early 80s, and that was, the age of like very passive neglect parenting. So, my brother and I, we would go off into the woods and play out there all day long. And so and if you've ever been to Ithaca, if you know the region, it's amazing. The beautiful waterfalls and gorges. And I mean, nature really is very present. And, in your mind, in your experience of the region. And that definitely imprinted on me. And so I've always been fascinated by nature, biological forms, science. I can't say that I was the most studious high school student. Definitely not at the time. But by the time I hit my senior year, I was a little bit concerned about getting into college and what my future would look like. And so I kind of turned myself around. And the two classes that I challenged myself with senior year were AP Art and AP Bio. And I definitely considered at a certain point in time, do I want to try to become a scientific illustrator? I chose a more spiritual fine art path for my art, but you can definitely tell that there's that illustrative, focus in the work as well.
Well, my next question is really the one that I've been thinking about for a couple of days now, knowing that I was going to come talk to you. Let's talk tools. Because to me, that's very exciting to see. I had the privilege of being in your studio, and not only did you show me some work, but I saw the tools of the trade that you were using. So, you work in graphite, a lot of your pieces, and you use rather nice papers quite a bit of the time. Did you always do that with the drawings with the graphites and leads? Have you always been like that, or did it develop over time? Why those materials?
Yeah. When I wanted to start working large, I was faced with this challenge of how do I take my affinity for detail, my somewhat, obsessive desire for control of the medium, and make it work on a large scale where I don't drive myself insane trying to cover, 16, 20, 30 square feet worth of paper. And that's where there was some invention that took place. I discovered blending stumps. I decided that instead of using them to just kind of move material around that's already on the page, that I would use it more like a paintbrush and roll it in graphite powder and then lift it onto the page. It makes a mess for sure, but it also allowed me to get these really dark, saturated blacks that you don't normally see in graphite. So most of my work is done using graphite powder. That was one of the things that enabled me to cover large areas, work faster, work looser for me, which is important. And that led to a number of other things. And so then, you can go to the art store and buy a chemise cloth for blending and stuff. I have children, so I had an old baby bib, and I was like, let me wrap this around my finger and start, moving the material that way. I started shaving down the blending stump to get a wedge end on it so that I could get a different kind of mark with it than with something that's cylindrical. Yeah, I use a dry brush like, Bob Ross,
I love Bob.
yeah, everyone does, right?
Yeah.
And so, I started looking for tools that would enable me to achieve the effects that I was going for.
Yeah.
And it was a very inventive process. And I have to give sculpture credit for this. My sculpture background taught me to make your own tools. I remember in ceramics class, in modeling, when I did figure modeling, it was all about, okay, you need to figure out what your style is, what you're going after, and then make the tool that's going to do what you need it to do.
Just like Brancusi.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Well, I love the idea, and I'm hoping that the pieces that you have behind you have posted somewhere. I'm hoping that we can see details of it. I think what's extraordinary, it's nice that we are able to at least share virtually, our artwork with everybody. But what I find really fascinating about your work is it's completely different when you're actually in the presence of it, because of the detail work that you're able to have, that those textures, you really need to be there. So I'm really hoping that all 5 of what you have behind you is somewhere posted.
They're on Instagram. That is kind of, like I said, the running archive of current work. I'm going to give a quick little shout out to a friend of mine who I'm hoping will tune in to watch this on Thursday and maybe ask a question or two. Friend from grad school, Austin Dodson. Austin, along with another good friend, Gabriel Byrne, the 3 of us formed a group after grad school that we would critique each other, hang out, drink some wine, and really put each other through the ringer, because when you're out of that academic environment, it's tough to get critical feedback and honest opinions, and to find someone who's willing to really plumb the depths with you.
Yeah.
And Austin, he gave it to me one day where I was talking about the detail and all the things I'm going after, and he kind of got up close. He's like, it falls apart now. But up close, I don't see what you're talking about, Greg. And that really pissed me off. And so then I was like, oh, I'm going to show him.
Well, it's always great to have a starting point of spite in artwork. So yeah, I can understand that.
It can be very fruitful territory. that idea of engaging with the work from different, viewing distances is really important.
Yeah.
And so I do want the work to work and function well from across the room.
Yeah.
From a middle distance, about 6-8 feet away, and then up close. So each level should be rewarding the viewer with something. And unfortunately, that just does not translate into, a digital medium, online, a static image. You need to be in the same space with the work to really explore it.
No matter how much the museums want us all to log on, you really got to be there. I'm curious about the piece behind you. Are these the most recent pieces that you've done?
These 4 small ones are, yeah.
Okay.
But literally, I finished this one last night or 2 nights ago. And these have all been, things that I've been doing over the last month, roughly. So and this is one that was from a series that directly preceded that. So, there are some others that fit into a series with that one. But yeah.
So you talk about work in series, and I know you as most of your work is done like that. So say when you start a new series, I'm curious to know, do you plan out, how far in advance do you plan? In other words, do you say, well, okay, this is the start of something, I'm going to make 6 more? Or is it just, does one lead to the next?
A bit of both.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna answer this in a couple of ways. One is that when I was an undergrad student, I had a professor. He was an adjunct from Puerto Rico. His name was Jose Buscalia. He was a traditionally trained cathedral sculptor. And he was in Boston doing some kind of research or degree study with Harvard in cognitive science and visual thinking. So I don't know if you're familiar with Rudolf Arnheim. He's someone who did a lot of investigation into the the psychology of vision and visual thinking. And so this professor that I had was very interested in that, and he had us do an exercise where we had a gridded sheet, 20 rectangles, and we had to, using horizontal and vertical lines only, come up with 20 different designs, each one different. And then we had to cut them out, put them into groups and, into sequence. And I actually have my 2D design students do this to this day. The brainstorming and problem solving exercise that was all about like what happens when you put yourself, you define these parameters, you have this agenda of, okay, now I'm going to have to do X number of these pieces, and like what happens, where do the inventions come, where do the new insights come as you go through this stress of trying to come up with something new every single time. And so I've actually employed that quite a bit in my work, as a mechanism, if you will, for pushing myself to make new discoveries and come up with new form languages and cover new territory. So when you're kind of what's driving this work at the moment is a certain kind of general form language, a certain general format, and what happens when I try to do number 36, number 37, number 38,
right?
The like.
Well, you push it so clearly, sort of, one discovery can lead to the next discovery, and I guess my next question is really kind of, I'm curious to know is, I find artists are constantly looking at everything, and I'd be curious to know, are you finding new inspirations aside from the work that you've already done? Are you finding new inspirations in, do you continue to look at nature, or are you finding other artists that you find inspiring, or is it a little bit of both?
It's primarily nature. So I definitely am one of those people that I love to go hiking. And when I'm out, I'm constantly like, ooh, look, turkey tail fungus. And, oh, there's, this cool little mushroom over here, this little patch of lichen. I definitely suffer from that magpie syndrome of, picking things up and taking it home with me. So most of the windowsills and the mantle over the fireplace, this little rocks and roots and, pieces of bark and the like. So I'm always, kind of looking at nature. I had my landlord when I was living on Corinthian Avenue was also an artist, and he made I thought a good observation about me one day, where he said, Greg, you're the kind of guy who, like, you want to go to the museum and see what's out there, but you kind of want to go by and like just
right.
Because it's so easy to get influenced overly by someone that you are really impressed by.
Yeah.
God, if I could only be like X,
Right.
And the way that I approach art is definitely with a strong emphasis on trying to be as unique and original and true to my own inner vision as I can be.
Yeah.
That I don't look at a ton of art.
Yeah. Well, I can see that in your work. I mean, you make me think of you're in good company. You make me think of the story. There was a famous story about Matisse being interviewed one day, and he was on camera, and they're walking together, and all of a sudden, he goes out of the frame, and they can't find him. It turns out, like, he saw something on the ground, and he had to pick it up that instant and check it out. So I see you doing that, and I must admit, even my own self now, when I pick up stuff, within this past year, I remember I picked up something and I said, hey, that looks like one of Greg's drawings. It was like a little piece of coral or something, but it had that structure in it. So, so speaking of the last year, we're now past 2020. We're in 2021. Looking back on the last year, any highlights?
This is going to be a kind of off the wall, but hey, you said we could go anywhere in this conversation.
Anywhere.
After the shutdown in March, so I'm a professor, as I mentioned before.
Right.
There's a transition to online learning and all of that, but I also had to find something that was going to kind of lift my spirits and kind of, I don't know, somehow signify that I was adapting to this new situation. And so I decided to go ahead and do something that I talked about and hadn't done previously.
Mm-hmm.
I got chickens.
All right, there's no way I would have guessed that. I'm thinking maybe he bakes pies or, he's into
Now,
growing plants, chickens. All right.
I am very into growing a vegetable garden. And
Okay.
decided to expand on that, and I built a coop and a run and a shed, and
Okay.
I turned my backyard into a little mini Versailles style, farm. Um, and
So
so,
you built Versailles for chickens.
yes,
Okay. How many?
I have the poultry palace in the backyard.
How many chickens? You said chickens, so it's more than
Four,
one.
four of them.
Four chickens. Okay. So in a year's time, when we have, part 2 of this conversation, am I going to see like chicken themed artwork sneaking its way into you?
I doubt it.
Have you ever looked at those feathers up close? I can see those textures.
Oh, they're beautiful. Yeah.
See, it is going to sneak its way in. That's great.
I think in a lot of ways, like, being an introvert, being a person who has a very kind of strong studio practice, I've adapted in a lot of ways to the stresses of being isolated and limited quite well.
Mm-hmm.
But even a good introvert wants to get out every now and then. So, like everyone, I will look forward to getting past this and getting back to a social life and
Yeah.
visit some galleries, see shows in person.
Well, we all look forward to seeing your work in person. So I've got one final question for you. Boy, time sure flies. So there's really no segue to this, but I am curious. So you've been making artwork for years now, decades, right? When you look back and when you first started to make artwork and what you're making now, um, do you find that is there a huge difference in the way that you approached it and what you did as opposed to now, or are those basic same tenets still there?
I don't know if this is going to be a good answer, how I feel about it, but the basic tenets are still there.
Mm.
A lot of the things that I was interested in, I'm continue to be interested in. And every now and then I ask myself, geez, Greg, should you try something different?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something radically new. And I say, no, actually, I really love the territory that I'm exploring. I find it inexhaustible
Mm-hmm.
and still yielding fertile results.
Yeah.
And so, in a lot of ways, it's very in keeping with what I started doing as an undergrad and what I embarked on then.
Well, I do I do see that pressure. There's always people that are always asking about what's new and what are you changing, and I much would rather respect good artwork that lasts for generations. It doesn't have to be new. The newest thing isn't always the best thing. So I can see that the work behind you. I've followed your work now for a couple of years, and I see it so morphing and changing. I see all these new discoveries that you are popping up from piece to piece. So I love the path that you're on. I can't wait to see what's next. So well, I wanted to thank you again for coming and agreeing to sit and talk with me today. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank again everybody who tuned in today. Thank you very much. And again, those people who helped support Allens Lane Art Center, especially in this time of the pandemic, we can't thank you enough for your support. So lastly, I also wanted to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, make sure to go to Greg's Instagram and his website. And if you have questions, reach out and talk to him and ask him questions. So I'm Craig Stover from Allens Lane Art Center. Thanks again for tuning in to Art Show, and we look forward to seeing you next week.